about an interesting Python script that is mainly used to connect to multiple devices and run a few set of commands. We've already seen the previous couple of videos from my channel wherein there were basic scripts that used to connect to a device and run one or two commands. Likewise, I had another video posted which was talking about running a script across multiple devices to collect some outputs. Now this script is slightly a bit advanced to that, but it is just again on the simplistic approach wherein we create a script that will look for a list of device IP addresses and it will try to connect to each of those device IP addresses and try to run a set of commands. So let's look into that script that I have here. Pretty simple script. I'll just walk through what I have here. So the script that I've named here is T1, just a name. Obviously, I am using Netmiko module to import it from the Python library, and the getpass, which you remember is to generate a password. What I'm now defining is, if you remember in the previous scripts, I used to have the username manually given within the device variable, and the password was also manually given or provoked with getpass. In this case, I am predefining it at the outer prompt of the script, so it will be easy to be parsed once and reapplied to multiple devices. So under the username category, I just have this particular variable where it is going to ask me for my username. And then the password is going to prompt for the password to be taken and applied to these usernames. So whatever I enter on the password is going to be mapped to this variable. Likewise, whatever you enter as a username, when you get this prompt as you run the script, will be mapped to this variable called username. Now there are a file called commands to run. So this is a text file that you may have like 10, 20 commands that you want to run on a box for sanity checks or for maintenance work. That is the text file that this particular script is now trying to open and read it each line at a time. So first of all, we open this particular file, which is there. I will open up the file and show you the contents of it. I've named it as commands to run just for ease of understanding. And it is just opened up and kept in a variable called f. Then they are read per line. That is what this particular syntax within the Python does. It's very standard syntax within the Python. And as you can see, whatever values are read are mapped to this variable called commands to send. Likewise, I have another file which has the device IP list. So I may have 20 devices that I want to connect to. So I just have to open up that device IP list, which will have all the IP addresses. Again, same logic as what we've used before to parse the commands. I'm parsing each of the commands and mapping it to a variable called devices. Just like how you mapped all your commands to a variable called commands to send, I'm mapping all the device IP addresses to a variable called devices. Now this is where it gets slightly interesting. We have the first for loop within the Python script. The for loop says for router in devices. So what is happening now is I am now defining a new variable called router that is going to look at each of the device IP addresses that was called in here as devices. Then I'm just printing a user friendly display which says print connecting to device. And that is just, it's going to be displaying this particular text along with the IP address that is being parsed. So that is why you see a plus router here. And now I'm going one step further and trying to map this IP information that is now available on the router to another variable called IP address of devices. Now, let me explain why this is done. It is just for ease of understanding on the script. So here, the next line will explain it. So now we define the variables. So Juno's device is now a variable where the device type, if you remember, I'm having to give it as Juniper Junos. In Cisco terms, it will be a different syntax. It is available on the internet. We can easily change that. Here, IP is equal to IP address of devices. So this is just for ease of understanding that I have defined this variable called router, which already has each of the device IP addresses to a new variable called IP address of device, and I'm just mapping it. So it is easy for anybody who's looking at the script to understand what is happening in the first for loop. And then the username, as you can see here now, it's calling for the variable that we had created right at the top of the script. So whatever input you enter here is now mapped to this variable and it is being called for here. Similarly for password, whatever you entered as a password as the script is run, it is mapped to this variable called password and it is now called for. So like this, you are probably able to avoid entering the username password details on your script to just give you an added security for your script. After this, you can notice this spacing on this Python script. We have first entered into the first for loop and we have identified the first device. Let's say I have 3 devices in my device list and I have identified the first device for which I have to run these commands in sequence. So I am mapping all devices to this variable called Juno's devices, because each of the IP addresses, as the for loop starts, the first IP will be mapped to a Juno's device. Then when the loop again happens for the second IP address, it will be mapping to this variable, and the third IP will be mapping to this variable. So I am mapping this Juno's devices to this new variable called all devices. So it makes it easier for us to interpret what is going to happen. Then comes the second for loop. The second for loop is just telling that for devices in all devices, which is again a variable, I am just invoking the Netmiko module to connect to the devices and send the commands. You may look at another for loop in this script. This is just because the fact that I am having multiple commands that I have to run within each box that I connect to, I cannot just give multiple commands within the standard net command send, because it will only take a single variable. Because now in our case, we want to send a list of commands, right? So that's why we are creating another for loop saying for each of the commands that we find in the commands to send, please send that as an output to the box with a return key. So this script is not complicated once we understand the framework of what we have done here. Just to go through it quickly, the standard modules for the Python are incorporated. You just define the variables where you enter your username, password that will be kept and readily available to be referenced at a different point in the script. Then we read the commands to be run, map it to a variable. Likewise, we read the device IP list file and map it to a variable. And we start off with the for loops. For each of the device IP addresses, we are just trying to get into the loop and start looking at configuring or running the commands for each of the loop. So as I was telling earlier, let's look at the content that is there on each of the text file. So first I'll take this file, commands to run. So you can see here, I have a list of commands. So you may have 20, 30 commands in your requirements. I've just added 2 commands for the ease of understanding. Similarly, the device IP list, you can see here, it also has a list of devices that I want the script to connect. So pretty much it'll have to connect to the first IP, run these 2 commands, connect to the second IP, run these 2 commands, connect to the third IP and run these 2 commands. That's exactly what I expect the script to do. Now let's try to run the script and see if it's able to execute it. I'm calling Python 3 and my script is named as T1, as you can see here. So I'm just running the script. So it's asking me for my username, exactly as the script was asking. If you remember, input, enter your SSH username. So I'm entering my username and it's asking me for the password, which will be masked. And you see, it's first connecting to the first device and it's running it sequentially. So if we were to scan through the script to understand what is happening, I'm just quickly scanning through it to show you. So here you go. So first thing what it did is it first passed the list of commands that I wanted to run. This is what I was referring to as list of commands, right? If it was a single command, I didn't need the third for loop. You would not require this third for loop. You could have simply ran net command and just the command itself. But the fact that I have a list of commands to run, I have to use this third for loop as well. So the commands are available, listing me these are the commands I'm going to run on each of these boxes. The script is telling us clearly that. So from this list, it is connecting to the first device, running those commands and giving us the outputs. Likewise, it is connecting to the second device and giving us those outputs. Similarly, it is doing it for the third device, as you can see here. So it's a pretty simplistic script that may be handy for for a few people in the ops or different departments within the networking organizations of a company. You may be able to use this. You can obviously enhance it. The intention of me sharing the script is just to share the basic script that you could have to run some day-to-day jobs. I will put this whole script on the description of my channel, so you can obviously play with it and enhance it. Thank you. Bye for now.